sprinkling somebody with para aduma water to be metayer him is usher rabbinically. It's not isser deraisa, but the chachamim made a gzeira. Ein adoiches haShabbos, shchita she mishum malacha, shchita which is mamish and av malacha, ein adin shelo titches haShabbos. So that should prove that we don't shecht on Shabbos. It says that by Asub Bnei Yisrael sa Pesach b'moyadoi, bein b'chol, bein b'Shabbos. So the Torah itself says that you're allowed to shech the korban Pesach on Shabbos. Amar lo Rebbe, haveli moyed la'elu k'moyed l'shchita. Yeah, but you wanted to say that you can carry the Pesach on Shabbos, or you can bring it chutz l'tchum. Shchita you have to do on the 14th day. You can't shech the day before. The other things could be nidchet to the day before because it doesn't necessarily ruin the korban if you carried it the previous day. Anything that can be done prior to Shabbos should be done prior to Shabbos. In fact, Klal Omer Rabbi Kiva, Kom Locha She'efshar La'asot Erev Shabbos. This is the same machlokes that we had in the 18th parak Masechta Shabbos, Rabbi Eliezer Demila, where Rabbi Eliezer permitted even machshirei mitzvah to be done on Shabbos, which of course the Chachamim argue with. So here the same thing. So for example, if you have to sharpen the knife for the Mila, so Rabbi Eliezer says you're allowed to sharpen it even on Shabbos. The Chachamim say no, you can do it Erev Shabbos. Now, of course, cutting the foreskin you can't do for Erev Shabbos because the Zman of the Mila is Shabbos. So anything that can't be done prior to Shabbos, of course, is Doicha Shabbos. But Kom Lo Chashev Shel Asoytzum Erev Shabbos, says Rabbi Kiva, Eino Doicha Shabbos. It's not Doicha Shabbos. Shchita Sheyev Shel Asoytzum Erev Shabbos. You can't shech the korban the day before because Shchita and Kabbalah and Zrik has to be done on the same day. So that's Doichas Shabbos. Now, Ton Rabbanon, the Gemara quotes a famous Baraisa. Halacha zu nisamu b'nei b'seira. Prior to Hillel Abavli becoming the Nasi and founding the house of Hillel, basically Hillel and his descendants, Rabbi Gamliel, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, eventually Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the 7th descendant from Hillel. So the house of Hillel, because he was also from the tribe of Yehuda, became the Nasiim. And this event occurred prior to Hillel. They were the Nasiim, the Bnei B'Seira. And the halacha of whether or not you were allowed to shech the korban Pesach on Shabbos, when the 14th day of Nisan fell on Shabbos, they forgot. They forgot whether or not you could shech the korban Pesach on Shabbos. They sent out word. Is there anybody who knows this din? There is a Jew who came up to Eretz Yisrael from Bavel. The Hillel Abavli Shmo, Sheshimesh Shnei Gdolei Ador, Shmaya Vavtalyon. The prior Nasi and Abbezdin, Shmaya Vavtalyon, Hillel studied under them. And he knows the Odeh and Pesach Doichas Shabbos Imlav. Sholchu v'karulo. So they called for Hillel. Amrlo. Klumatay Odeh Pesach Doichas Shabbos Imlav. Do you know whether Korban Pesach is Doichas Shabbos? Amrlehem. I understand. Pesach Echad Yesh Lanu B'Shana Shedoichas Shabbos. What? You think this is the only example of a Korban where we see that it's Doichas Shabbos? V'alo harbe yoyser mimasayim psachim. Yesh Lanu B'Shana Shedoichas Shabbos. He meant that there are 200 korbanos that are shechted on Shabbos. For example, The Ola Satomid is offered every morning and every afternoon, even on Shabbos. So right there, you have 100. And then Uvyom, 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 Uvyom HaShabbos, Shnei Chvosim, B'nai Shon, the Musaf of Shabbos is Shnei Chvosim. So again, if you have 50 Shabbosim, Shnei Chvosim is another 100. So that's, you have more than 200 Korbonos that are Doicha Shabbos. Amru lo minay lecha. So they said, where's your source for this? Amru le'am nemar, moyadoi ba'pesach. It says, what we said before, vayasu b'nei Yisrael pesach b'moado. And it says, v'nemar moyado b'tami. It says, tzavas b'nei Yisrael, v'yamarta leihem, es korbani lachmi li'ishai reach nichochi, tishmeru la'akriv li b'moado. So it says moyado by Pesach and moyado by Tami. So we make a gzeira shava. Ma moyado amar b'Tami. So we know by the korban Tami it's doicha Shabbos. Af moyado amar b'Pesach doicha Shabbos. Now, besides the gzeira shava, Hillel said, "V'od kal v'chomer." He brings a kal v'chomer. Ma Tami she'ein onush koris. Doichas Shabbos. So the korban tamid is a mitzvah saseh, but it's not mitzvah saseh, which is connected to kores. If you're mavatal the korban tamid, nobody gets kores. Pesach she'anush kores enudin she'doichas Shabbos. So the korban Pesach, where if a person doesn't bring is mavatel the korban Pesach, you get kores, certainly should be doichas Shabbos. So when they heard these halachos from Hillel, miyad, oishivu b'rosh minu nosi aleim. So they immediately declared Hillel the Nasi, v'hayadorish kol hayom kulo b'hilchos haPesach. And he spent the remaining of the day teaching Klal Yisrael the halachos of Pesach. Hischil mekantrin b'dvarim. He began insulting the Bnei B'Seira. Amar lahem, mikoram lachem she'elemi bavel v'yanosi aleichem. Who's the cause that little old me, Hillel Bavli, came up from Bavel and now is appointed the Nasi? It's atzlus shahisa bachem. It's laziness by you. Shloshimashtam shnei gdolei ador shmai v'avtalyon. You didn't do shimush. You didn't study under shmai v'avtalyon. Amr lo Rebbe. So one of the people in the audience asked Hillel Akasha. Shachach v'lo hevi sakim erev Shabbos ma'u. So it's Yud Daled Nisan, which is on Shabbos, and they forgot to bring a knife on Friday. So now there's no knife to shech the korban Pesach. What do? Amr lan halacha zu shamati v'shachachti. I heard the halacha of that, but I forgot it. The Gemara will go through this. Let's watch Klal Yisrael. We'll see what they do. If they're not Nevi'im, they're the children of Nevi'im. Lamachar, Misha Peschu Tle, somebody who brought a sheep as a korban Pesach, Tochavo B'tzamra. He would stick the knife in the wool, and the sheep carried it. Misha Peschu Gdi, and if it was a goat, Tochavo Ben Karnav. They placed the knife between the horns, and the goat brought it in. Ra Ma'asav Niskar Alocha. Hillel saw this. Oh yeah, that's the halacha. You bring it in, kila achayad. You don't carry it. You stick it into the animal, and the animal brings it. We'll see what that halacha, how that works. Amar Mar. So we're going to analyze the Baraisa. Nemar moyadu b'Pesach, the Nemar moyadu b'Tami. It says that you shall shech the Pesach b'moyadoi in its time, and it says it by the Tommy. So, ma moyadoi amar b'Tommy doiches Shabbos, af moyadoi amar b'Pesach doiches Shabbos through Gzeirus Shava, we say just like the Korban Tommy, the processing of it, the Shechita, etc., is doiches Shabbos, so too the Korban Pesach. Freit Gemara the Tommy Gufe Minol on the doiches Shabbos. How do you know that the Olas HaTomid is doiches Shabbos? Do you understand from the plain meaning of the word moyadoi that no matter what day the moed falls on, you do it? Well then, why did I have to learn Gzeirus Shava from Korban Tomid? Pesach nami hatziv bemoado. If the plain meaning of moyado, we understand that it means you shecht it on that day, no matter what day it is, even if it's Shabbos, well, we wouldn't need Gzeirus Shava to the Tomid, because it says by Pesach also, like I read, Vayasu b'nei Yisrael sa Pesach b'moyadoi. Ela moyadoi lo mashmalei. So from the words moyadoi, it's not clear that that means it's doiches Shabbos. Ochanami moyadoi lo mashmalei. So by the Tomid, it also doesn't mean for sure that it's doiches Shabbos. So now we're back to the question: how do we know that the Olas Tomid is doiches Shabbos, so we can learn Gzeirus Shava to Pesach to be doiches Shabbos? Ela Amar Kra. There's another pasuk. It says Olas Shabbos b'Shabbatoi al Olas HaTomid. Right? The Olas of Shabbos is offered on Shabbos. Michlal that Oila the Tomid crave b'Shabbos. So it's a straight pasuk. So then we learn Gzeirus Shava from Moyado to the Korban Pesach. Amar Mar. V'oid kal v'chomer. Hillel taught a kal v'chomer. Uma Tomid she'ein onish koris doiches HaShabbos. Pesach she'onish koris ein odin she'doiches HaShabbos. So we said Pesach is more chomer. It certainly should be doiches Shabbos. Oh, ikle mifrach malat Tomid she'kein todir v'cholim. There are two aspects of the Korban Tomid that, in a sense, are more stringent than the Korban Pesach. Number one, we have a principle, Tadir v'sheinu Tadir, Tadir koidim. Means the Olas HaTomid was offered every day. The Korban Pesach is offered once a year. So the Korban Tomid is certainly more Tadir. That's number one. Number two, the Korban Olah is completely burnt. Nobody eats from the Korban Olah, from the Olas HaTomid. The Korban Pesach, the Baalim eat from it. So, Kavachomer Armalul Bereshu Parchua. So Hillel really started off with the Kavachomer, and then they hacked on it, they broke it, and then V'hodar Armalul Gzeirus Shava. And then they taught them the Gzeirus. Then he taught them the Gzeirus Shava. So I don't understand, says the Gemara. The Chiniach had to go make Gzeirus Shava Kavachomer Lamali. I understand. You have the Gzeirus Shava. What do you have to teach me the Kavachomer for? He was speaking to the Bnei Beseira as the G'dolei Ador. So I understand Bishma Gzeirus Shava Lo Gamrisu De'einodim Don Gzeirus Shava Miatzmo. That Gzeirus Shava, I understand why you didn't learn it on your own. You didn't get a Masorah from Shmaya Vavtanu. So you didn't learn the Gzeirus Shava because you can't darshan your own Gzeirus Shava. But a kal v'chomer is something that you can deduce from logic. You don't have to receive that b'mesorah from your Rebbe. So he questioned them, why didn't you learn the kal v'chomer? Amrulei kal v'chomer prichuhu. We didn't learn the kal v'chomer because we had a kasha that the oila was tadir and kolil. Oh, so now he'll have to teach them the Gzeirus Shava that he had learned from Shmaya Vavtan. Amar. The Machar. So remember, the Hillel, they called Hillel Friday, the day before Erev Pesach, which fell on Shabbos, to know what the halacha was the next day. So that's why it says in the Brisa, Lamachar, the next day they observed Klal Yisrael, Misha Pischot, whoever was bringing a sheep, Toichav Lo B'Tzamro, he stuck the knife in the wool. whoever brought a gedi, toichav lo ben karnav, he placed the knife in between the horns. Freit the Gemara, how could they do that? You're not allowed to use hegdish. You're being mishtamish with hegdish. For example, lo savod b'chor shorecha. You're not allowed to work a bechor, which is kodesh mirechem. So the Gemara says, Ki Hillel. They learned like Hillel, the Tanya. So during Hillel's time, nobody did work with their korban oil. Why not? He taught them to bring the animals as chulin to the Azara. And only once they were physically in Azara were they magdish the animal to say Arezu Ola. That way, if they carried a knife in the wool of the sheep on the way to the Azara, it wasn't Hegdish yet, so they were not violating the rule of being mishtamish with Hegdish. Right? He was Magdish, they did the smich and they shechted. So the Gemara says, based on this answer, they brought the Korban Pesach on Shabbos, without declaring it hegdish yet, and they brought the knife that way, because they're not over being mishtamish with hegdish, and declared the animal the korban pesach then. You can't be magdish something on Shabbos. Vatnan, ein magdishin, vein marichin, vein machrimin, vein magdin true maestris. You're not allowed to make something hegdish. You can't estimate the worth of something, like you want to give an erech vow, to say, I want to give the value of such and such person to the Beis HaMikdash. You can't be machrim your assets, where you give all of your assets to the Beis HaMikdash. Or you can't even separate Truma and Meiser on Shabbos, because it's uvda d'chol. It's involving business. Kolelu beyond tefamru kavachayim b'Shabbos. You can't do these activities on Yom Tov. You certainly can't do it on Shabbos. So we're back to the question, how did they bring the knife in the wool of the Korban Pesach? They can't be magdish it on that day. So then they magdished it before, and then they're mishtamish with hegdish. So the Gemara says, this rule, that you can't be magdish, hanim mili b'choyva she'en kavulam zman. That's if you have an obligation to bring a korban that's not tied to time. For example, a korban chatas. Person ate dam b'shogeg. He has to bring a korban chatas. There's no zman that he has to bring it. So such a korban you can't be magdish on Shabbos. But a korban that is specifically tied to time, and it's due that day. So if that day is Shabbos, you're allowed to be magdish it. So far, we think we have our answer. That they brought the animal as chulin, with the knife in the wool, and then once they got to the Azor, they were magdish it. Mechamer means you're not allowed to use your animal on Shabbos. You can't work your animal. And by having your animal carry something, you're over the law of Mechamer. The Gemara answers, Mechamer kilachayad. You're doing it like this. You're not doing it directly. You're doing it kilachayad. You're sticking the knife into its wool. That's not the normal way an animal will carry something. So the Gemara says, fine. Whenever you do an av malacha, kilachayad, fine. You didn't violate the Doraisa law. But midirabbanan, it's usher. You can't do an Isser Deraisa Kilach Hayad just Tamazoi. So Hainu the Kabomine. That's why they had the following question. Davar Sheyesh Lo Heter Minat Torah. Really, it's permitted Minat Torah. For example, you can shech the Korban Pesach. However, Dvar Shvus Oimei Lefana. There's a rabbinic prohibition. That is, there's this carrying Kilach Hayad in front of it. So Lo Oikra Kilach Hayad Malka Mitzvah Mai. Can you do the Kilach Hayad rabbinic Isser in order to fulfill the mitzvah? I had heard this halacha, but I forgot it. Ella, and in fact, the halacha in the Rambam is shochach b'lohevi sakin shchita lepesach shechal b'Shabbos noisle ben karnei agdi or b'tzar hakev shemagil lemedish magdish sham keilel. That means you're allowed to violate a rabbinic shvus in order to fulfill a deraisa dika mitzvah. Rav Yudam Rav, kol misyaer, whoever is arrogant, and Hillel showed a little arrogance when he commented on the Bnei Beseira that they were lazy, and if they weren't lazy, they wouldn't have forgotten, right? Kol misyaer im chachamhu chachmaso mistalekes mimenu. If he's smart, some of his wisdom will be lost. In Navihu Nevuasim Mistalekas Bimenu. His Nevuah will be lost. We learn that principle from Hillel. Damar Mar, Hischil Mekantrim Bidvorim. He began sort of making fun of them. The Carmelu. And immediately after, it says that they asked Hillel the halacha, and he said, halacha zu shamati v'shachachti. The Mida Keneged Mida, or he showed this din that whoever's misyair will forget his learning. In Navihu Nevuas Mistalekes Men Midvara. Midvara Navi. We learned this Chazal when we learned in Sefer Shoftim Shiras Dvara. Dichsiv Chadlu Prozon B'Yisrael. Chadlu Ad Shekamti Dvar Shekamti Em B'Yisrael. She praised herself. She said, I am the mother of Israel, and that there was lawlessness until I came about. She was making fun of the manhigim before her, and she was sort of praising what she did. So that caused her to lose her nevuah. Uchsiv uri uri dvora, uri uri dabrish. Wake up, Dvora, and say the shir, because momentarily she lost her nevuah.
This whole Maisa doesn't sound like Hillel.
Correct, because Hillel is the most safer panim yafa. It's all of the dinim of, but that's exactly the Maisa. That's the Maisa of Hillel. So maybe he learned a lesson from the fact that he lost his chachma. That because this is his first event as the Nasi was this. So from then on, Hillel learned his lesson. You have to say that. And I don't see any, Tosus doesn't say anything. Okay.
You can't ask
the Iyun Yaakov says that even someone who is an on of Mikol Adam, if he's misyair, he'll be punished.
Yeah, but you can't have that. You have changes he changed the stature, so maybe he made a mistake.
And then it says like this: in fact, Hillel did it l'shem shamayim. He wanted to say, listen, you forgot halacha because you were not mishamesh Gdolei Yisrael. His kavanah was not to praise himself. It was he was trying to praise limud Torah. Still, it was goyrem and oynish to him. Back to the Gemara. Reish Lakish Amar. It's not just the only midah which makes you forget. Kol adam shekoyes, anger. Im chachamu chachmasu mistalekes mimenu. He also loses his chachma. Im navihu minuvuasu mistalekes mimenu. Chachamu chachmasu mistalekes mimenu Moshe. Tichsiv. Vayitzof Moshe al pkudei achayim. When they came back from the battle of Midian, it says, Vayitzof Moshe al pkudei achayim sarei alafim sarei amayos habaim mitzvah milchama. He was upset with them. Uksiv. Immediately after it says, Vayomer Elazar HaKohen El Anshe HaTzava Ba'im LaMelchama Zot Chukas HaTorah Shetzivah Hashem Es Moshe. Michlal the Moshe Yoleminei. Moshe forgot that halacha because he got angry. And where do you see that a Navi loses his nevuah? Im Navi hu nevuah mistalekes ben Elisha. Elisha not dichsiv. Leipnei Yoshafat Melech Yehudani no say imabit elecha v'mereka. He got angry with Melech Yehoshaphat. Ksiv atak chuli minagim. So Elisha had lost his nevuah. He requested that they bring him a harp player. He needed music to bring the nevuah back to him. On Rav Mani Bar Patish. Even if Hashem had planned something great for a person, if he becomes angry, they'll get to lower him. Minolan me Eliyav. Eliyav was David HaMelech's older brother. Shenema, Vaychar af Eliyav b'David. When David came to the battle of Goliath, so the brothers were there, and David showed up. So he said to him, he got angry. And David was supposed to be watching the family sheep. And who told you to bring the sheep here? I know you're angry, you are evil of heart. You're fascinated by war. And that's why you came. So if Shmuel, we're going to learn Mitzvah Hashem in Shmuel Aleph, that Shmuel is told to go anoint the next Melech after Shaul from the house of Yishai. And Yishai brings out his 7 sons, and Shmuel says, no, none of these are it. And he says, Lo bazeh bachar Hashem. For each son, he says, no, Hashem didn't want this one, doesn't want this one. And by Eliab says, Vayom Hashem el Shmuel, al tabeit el mareyo vel gova koma. Don't look how handsome he is and how tall he is. Kimi astiu, I hate him. That's because he had gotten angry. Which implies that up until now, Michlal that Hashem was planning great things for him. But he lost it because he was Kotza. Now, pretty amazing thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that he was royal Malchus was taken away from him and given to David. Because the Maisa Mashiach happened before the Maisa of Kas. But he was royal Gedula Cheres. And because Hashem saw that he was easily angered, he took it away from him. Fine. Fine. From the Gzeira Shava, Moyado, we learned that both the Oilas Atomid and the Korban Pesach is Dorcha Shabbos. The Dochu Tuma Minolam. How do I know that you're allowed to bring the Oilas Atomid and the Korban Pesach in a state of Tuma? We're going to see that if 51% of Klal Yisrael is Tomei, these Korbanos, since they're Korbonei Tzibur, can be brought in a state of Tumah. How do we know that? Amri, it's just like the Korban Pesach's din, that it can be Doicha Shabbos, was learned from the Tamid, Hachanami Yolif Tamid Be Pesach Linyan Tuma. The din that you're allowed to bring the Orlas Tamid in a state of Tuma was learned out from Korban Pesach. Freit the Gemara Pesach Gufe Minomon. Where's the source material that a Korban Pesach can be offered even in the state of Tumah? Om Rabbi Yochanan the Omar Kra, Ish Kiyet Tamela Nefesh. All B'derech Rechuka Lachem, all L'doro Sechem, V'asa Pesach L'Hashem, B'chodesh Hasheni B'abasar Yom Ben Arban Yasu Al So Matzos V'M Yochlu. This is the din of Pesach Sheni. So Ish Nidchel Pesach Sheni. An individual who becomes Tameh is pushed off to Pesach Sheni. But the Ein Tzibur Nidchel Pesach Sheni. But if the Tzibur became Tameh, they are not pushed off to Pesach Sheni. They're allowed to do the Pesach Rishon even in a state of Tumah. Avdi B'Tumah. Armler Shemen Lakish Rav Yochanan. Ema Ish Nidchel Pesach Sheni. And maybe Tzibur less Lutakanda Lo Pesach Rishon Lo Pesach Sheni. Who says maybe the individual Ish is pushed off, and maybe the Tzibur has no takana. They can't do Pesach Sheni, but maybe they can't do Pesach Rishon either. Where do you see from there that the Tzibur is allowed to do Pesach Rishon? El Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish mehacha. It says, Vayishalchu min ha'machaneh, kol tzarua v'chol zav, the Metzora and the Zav, the Chol Tomei L'Nefesh, and somebody who is Tomei Meis, who's come into contact with a dead body, they have to be sent out of the Machaneh. It says, Tzav is Bnei Yisrael, so we, Vayishalchu L'Machaneh, Kol Tzarua V'chol Zav, Chol Tomei L'Nefesh. Yomer Tmei Meisim. The Gemara says you could learn a Kavach Chomer. Just teach me the din that the Tumas Meis is sent out. The Al Yomer Zav in the Mitzayron. You wouldn't have to say the Zav in the Mitzayron. Va'ani Omer im Tmei Meisim Mishtalchin Zav in the Mitzayron L'Koshakin. So throughout Shas, they always view Tumah that emanates from your body itself as a worse Tumah than when you get Tumah from an external source. Even Tumas Meis. So for example, if you touch a Sheretz or a Nevela, you become Tameh, but you become Tameh for one day. And then you go into the mikvah, even the same day, you're at Tvul Yom, and then you have Erev Shemesh that night. You can eat Kotchim and Truma and everything. Now, if you touch a dead body, or in the room with a dead body, you're Tameh for 7 days. You have to have Paraduma water sprinkled on you on the 3rd and 7th day. On the 7th day, you go to the mikveh, you're at Tvul Yom. That night, Erev Shemesh, you can eat Kotchim and Truma. However, there are 4 types of Tumah: Zav, Zava, Yoledis, and Mitzora. What do those 4 have in common? Tumah emanates from their body, right? A Zav and a Zava, they have a seminally mission. A Mitzora has an affliction of the skin. A Yoledis gives birth. So they go through 7 days they need 7 clean days. Then they go to the mikvah on the 7th day. They're Tvul Yom. That night, they have Erev Shemesh. They can only eat Truma. Kotchim they can't eat until the 8th day. By Yom HaShmini, they have to bring Korbanos. They are called Mechusar Kippurim. So you see, they're more stringent. So the Gemara is arguing, if you have to send out from the Machaneh Tomei Meis, well, I would know Kavach Chomer that you have to send out a Zav and a Mitzvah. Ella, there's a limud that we're going to learn from this. This is extra. Didn't have to be there because it could have been learned from a Kavach Chomer. And this is going to teach me an aspect of Tumah regarding the Korban Pesach. And that we'll learn tomorrow. So tomorrow, the schedule, we will do the Tzur Rabbanon at 8 o'clock. We're going to finish the din of Trumas and Maestris, as well as the Dine of Orla. both in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz. And maybe we will start Hilchos Nedarim tomorrow. What's one of the last sugis in your Deya. And that's at 8 o'clock. And then at 9 o'clock, we'll do the Daf Yomi. Okay? Have a good day,
All right,
everybody.
good night.
Good, thank you.
Good night.
Square.
Go ahead.